I felt the shift in him before I understood it. The restaurant was warm, familiar, the kind of place where the candles flickered softly against brick walls, and the air smelled like garlic and wine. But across from me, the man I'd been dating for exactly 31 days watched me with a strange, heavy intensity, like he'd been waiting for the perfect moment to drop something he knew would hit hard. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen, a 2-carat designer engagement ring, bright enough to hurt my eyes. $18,000, a number so absurd it barely felt real. Then he said it, calm, controlled, like a verdict. Pay for the engagement ring now, or I'm leaving. The sentence landed with the weight of a slammed door. Not raised voice, not anger, just a cold, steady certainty that made the air around us tighten. I stared at him, waiting for the smirk, the laugh, the just kidding. But he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't break. You want me to pay for the ring? I asked. The ring I'm going to propose with, he corrected, like I'd misunderstood something obvious. If you're serious about us, you'll invest in our future. If you won't, then I walk. Tonight. The confidence in his voice chilled me more than the words themselves. This wasn't a conversation. It was a demand. Sharp, manipulative, wrapped in the illusion of romance. We've been dating for 1 month, I said quietly. And? He replied, leaning back with entitlement. It's so thick it felt suffocating. Commitment shouldn't take years. Either you're in or you're not. For a moment, everything around us blurred. The restaurant noise, the music, the soft clinking of plates. It all collapsed into a single, pulsing awareness that this man was not who I thought he was, that this moment was a crossroads I hadn't seen coming. But then clarity hit, swift, clean, undeniable. I lifted my glass, took a slow breath, set it down and said, I choose option 2. His expression fractured, shock, disbelief, anger flickering through it like lightning behind a storm cloud. You're not serious, he whispered. For the first time, I said, pushing back my chair, I am. I left the restaurant with my heart pounding and a shiver crawling down my spine, convinced I had just dodged something dangerous. I didn't know then that this wasn't an ending. It was the spark that would ignite everything that came after. Looking back now, I can trace the entire disaster to a single swipe on a dating app about 6 weeks before that dinner. At the time I was 29, comfortably settled into my work routine and cautiously dipping my toes back into dating after a long stretch of disappointing, forgettable dates. Men who talked only about themselves, men who wanted something casual, men who treated connection like a buffet line, easy to taste, easier to replace. So when I matched with him, everything felt different. He was handsome in that polished, effortless way that suggested confidence but not arrogance. His messages were warm, clever, surprisingly thoughtful. And on our first date, sitting across from him at a quiet cafe, I felt myself relax in a way I hadn't in months. He asked real questions. He listened. He laughed easily. Nothing felt forced. By the second date, we'd discovered we shared the same taste in movies, the same music obsessions, even the same oddly specific fascination with true crime podcasts. It felt like momentum, like one coincidence after another lining up to say, maybe this one is different. I wasn't naive, but I was hopeful. After a string of half-hearted connections, I finally felt like I'd found someone worth investing time in. We didn't rush anything. We messaged, we called, we went on slow, easy dates, the kind where conversations stretch past closing hours, the kind where you start to imagine possibilities, not a future together necessarily, but a next date and then a date after that. Month 1 passed in a blur of comfortable routines, takeout nights, long drives, shared playlists, inside jokes. He seemed grounded, charming, emotionally present in a way that felt rare. I remember thinking, if this keeps going like this, maybe I won't have to start over again. But even inside that warmth, there were flickers, quiet, subtle signals that didn't register fully until later. He once mentioned how his best friend's girlfriend demanded real commitment early on, and he praised it. Another time, he talked about his mother telling him not to waste time on women who don't prove they're serious. He said it like good advice, like gospel. At the time, I brushed it off as quirks, not red flags. I assumed he meant emotional commitment, not financial proof. I didn't know then that his mother's influence hovered over him like a shadow. I didn't know how deeply he had internalized her belief that commitment must be demonstrated through sacrifice, and in relationships, that sacrifice should come from the woman. In the beginning, he made me feel seen, like someone finally matched the energy I gave. So when he started texting a little more intensely, when he asked where I saw things going, when he acted disappointed if I didn't text back immediately, I chalked it up to enthusiasm, a man who genuinely liked me. I didn't see the pattern then. Not the subtle entitlement woven between compliments, not the quiet assumptions about what I owed him emotionally, not the pressure building underneath the surface of every small, seemingly innocent conversation. The truth is, it felt good to have someone choose me with certainty. After months of lukewarm dates and incompatible matches, he felt refreshing, clear, intentional, invested. I mistook intensity for sincerity. I mistook pressure for passion. And I mistook compatibility for safety. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was how quickly that intensity would turn into expectation, and how expectation would turn into an ultimatum sharp enough to slice the entire relationship apart in a single night. Because long before he pushed that ring photo across the table, the seeds of the ultimatum had already been planted. I just hadn't recognized the garden they grew from. The first real crack didn't appear all at once. It was more like a quiet shift, a tightening of something I couldn't name, a heaviness settling between us even on normal days. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. New relationships come with nerves, right? People get insecure, people get attached, people get weird. But his weirdness wasn't random. It was calculated, predictable in its own unsettling way. It started with his phone. On our earlier dates, he barely touched it. But somewhere around week 3, it became a permanent fixture in his hand. His eyes darted to the screen constantly, not in a distracted, scrolling way, but in a monitoring way, as if waiting for something, as if someone else had a stake in whatever was happening between us. One evening, when I jokingly asked, "Are you expecting a secret mission?" he laughed a little too hard, then slipped the phone face down on the table as if protecting it from being seen. I brushed it off, but something in me tightened. Then came the comments, little ones at first. Relationships are serious investments. Both people have to contribute. My mom says commitment should feel like effort. My friend's girlfriend showed she was the one by helping him buy something big early on. I thought he was speaking generally, philosophizing. I didn't know he was warming up to something. Another night, we were watching a true crime documentary, one of those episodes where financial manipulation was the red flag everyone ignored. Halfway through, he paused the TV and said, with unnerving sincerity, "You can tell who's serious about a relationship by whether they're willing to risk something for it." I laughed it off. He didn't. His eyes stayed fixed on me like he was studying my reaction. That's when the atmosphere began to shift. Not enough to run, just enough to notice. His affection grew more intense, almost rehearsed, as if he needed to build momentum toward something. He complimented me more, sent longer messages, asked deeper questions, but beneath it all, there was a subtle undercurrent, a waiting, expectant energy, like he was leading me somewhere, like he needed me to be softened before the impact. Around the same time, he began talking more about his mother, not stories, but opinions he repeated with unsettling loyalty. "She says men shouldn't waste time. If you find someone promising, lock it down. She always told me women who don't invest early won't stay. My mom thinks commitment is about proving yourself." At first I thought, okay, overbearing mom, typical. But there was something about the way he quoted her, devoted, unquestioning, almost rehearsed, that made me uneasy. One day, he mentioned his best friend's girlfriend getting a promise ring after 2 weeks. "She showed she was worth it," he said. "She wasn't afraid to take the first step." I remember feeling a strange pinch in my chest, like he was setting the stage for something he hadn't yet said. Then the pressure began. If I didn't respond quickly enough, he'd text again, "Everything okay? You seem distant." If I made plans without him, he'd say, "I thought we were building something real." If I hesitated on anything, he'd sigh softly, disappointed, like I'd failed some unspoken test. It wasn't anger, it was expectation, quiet, heavy, impossible to ignore. Piece by piece, the air between us changed. Warmth became weight, affection became scrutiny, curiosity became evaluation. And even though I pushed the unease away, told myself it was early days, that I was overthinking, my instincts whispered the truth I wasn't ready to face. Something was coming, something he was preparing for, and somehow I was part of the plan. The night everything unraveled didn't arrive with thunder. It came quietly, wrapped in soft lighting and the comforting smell of basil and tomatoes. I remember thinking the restaurant felt warmer than usual, almost too warm, like the air itself knew something I didn't. He seemed tense from the moment we sat down. Not outwardly angry, just tightly coiled, shoulders stiff, jaw clenching in tiny pulses whenever he thought I wasn't looking. His fork scraped against his plate with a slow, deliberate rhythm. His thumb tapped his phone screen constantly, not scrolling, checking, waiting. "Are you okay?" I finally asked. He looked up with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Perfect. But it wasn't true. I knew it. My body knew it. And the space between us knew it most of all. Halfway through dinner, he set down his fork with a quiet click that felt louder than it should. Then he reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and slid it across the table like a dealer placing a decisive card. A ring filled the screen. An engagement ring. A 2-carat oval diamond gleaming against a velvet background. Designer brand. High-end. The kind of ring people post online with captions like "he did so good." But this wasn't him doing anything. Before I could speak, he leaned in, voice low and steady. "I've decided this is the ring I'm going to propose with, and I need you to pay for it." My heart dropped so fast it almost felt physical. "What?" He didn't blink. "Pay for the engagement ring now, or I'm leaving." The sentence didn't just land, it lodged. Sharp, cold, wrong. For several seconds, I forgot how to breathe. I stared at him, waiting for a laugh, a twitch at the corner of his mouth. Anything that meant this was a joke delivered poorly. Nothing. He held my gaze with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Not pleading, not nervous, confident, entitled, certain I would fold. "We've been together 1 month," I whispered. 31 days, he corrected, as if that made it more reasonable. "And I'm ready for commitment, but commitment requires proof." "Proof?" My voice cracked, not from fear, but disbelief. He nodded slowly, like he was explaining something obvious. "You paying for the ring shows you're serious about us. I'm offering the proposal. You contribute financially. It's equal effort." Equal. The word echoed hollow in my chest. "And if I don't?" I asked, even though I already knew. He shrugged, casual, rehearsed, like he'd practiced the gesture in front of a mirror. "Then there's no point continuing this. I won't stay with someone who won't invest in our future." My pulse thudded painfully. The room felt suddenly distant. The clinking plates, the bursts of laughter from nearby tables, the soft Italian guitar music. Everything dimmed as a single realization crystallized. This man wasn't asking. He was demanding, and he believed he was right. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Why would you expect this from someone you barely know?" His expression sharpened. "Because I see potential, and potential needs commitment. My mom always said if a woman won't put in effort early, she never will." There it was, the shadow behind the ultimatum, the voice whispering through his. In that moment, I didn't just see him. I saw the blueprint he'd been raised under, the mother he idolized, the expectations he absorbed as truth, the manipulation disguised as relationship wisdom. He wasn't negotiating. He was delivering a generational script. I stared at the ring again, its sparkle suddenly sinister under the warm lights. $18,000. The price tag of his version of love, a transaction posing as commitment. My stomach twisted. He sat back, waiting, so sure, so calm, so certain he'd cornered me into compliance. I felt a clarity rise within me, so sharp it burned. Not anger, not sadness. Recognition. This wasn't love, this wasn't partnership. This wasn't even about a ring. It was a test, a trap, a demand for control disguised as devotion. I lifted my water glass, my hand steadied. The coolness of the rim grounded me. Then I set it down and looked directly into his expectant eyes. "I choose option 2. His face didn't fall gently. It cracked, like glass fracturing under pressure. Shock, confusion, fury flickering behind his pupils. "You're not serious," he breathed. "I'm completely serious," I said, rising from my seat. "You gave me 2 choices. I picked one." He reached slightly across the table, not touching me, but grasping at the illusion of leverage slipping through his fingers. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said softly. "I'm avoiding one." I placed my share of the bill on the table, turned, and walked out into the night air, my heart pounding, my mind spinning, but my feet certain. The door closed behind me, and with it, the version of him I'd once thought I knew. When I stepped out of the restaurant, the night air hit me like a shock, cool, sharp, and strangely cleansing. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until my lungs finally flooded with air. My hands were shaking. whether from adrenaline or disbelief, I couldn't tell. I'd walked away. I'd actually stood up, looked at a man who believed he had cornered me and refused to play his game. But the momentary rush of clarity didn't protect me from what came next. Back home, I dropped my keys on the counter and just stood there in the dim glow of my kitchen, the silence pressing in from all sides. Part of me wanted to crumble onto the floor and cry, not over losing him, but over the nauseating realization that someone I trusted, even briefly, had tried to twist love into a financial exam. What did I miss? Why didn't I see the signs sooner? How close was I to saying yes, just to avoid a scene? The questions swirled faster than I could answer them. I poured myself a drink, whiskey, something grounding, and took a long breath. My chest ached, but not from heartbreak. It was something deeper, something older, that familiar old fear that maybe I hadn't been careful enough, smart enough, aware enough. I had chosen myself tonight, but choosing yourself doesn't erase the doubt, not immediately. I had just taken my second sip when the first text came through. 8:43 p.m. Him. Are you serious? You threw everything away because of one conversation? I stared at the message, my pulse ticking. I didn't respond. 2 minutes later. You completely blindsided me. I wasn't expecting you to walk out. Another ping. I thought you cared. Clearly I was wrong. Then, we had something real. I was ready to commit. You weren't. The wave of messages grew faster, hotter, more erratic. Why would you embarrass me like that? You didn't even try to talk it out. You could have handled that better. I placed my phone face down on the couch, but it kept lighting up, buzzing, vibrating against the cushions like a trapped insect. I didn't need to see the screen to feel the emotional whiplash. Then, a sharp shift. 9 p.m. Him. Forget it. Do whatever you want. There are plenty of women who understand what commitment means. I swallowed hard. My heart wasn't breaking. It was recoiling. But the whiplash wasn't over. 3 minutes later. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. Please just talk to me. I panicked. Another. You mean more to me than you know. Don't throw us away. Then, like a pendulum snapping back. I can't believe you walked out on me. That was childish. Seriously, who does that? I didn't answer. Not one message. The silence agitated him more than any reply possibly could. The text came in waves. Anger, guilt-tripping, then soft apologies, crafted to tug at my empathy. If I had responded even once, I knew exactly what he would do. Pull me into a conversation designed to blur his wrongdoing, shift blame, and trap me in a cycle of justification. At 10:12 p.m., he sent a different kind of message. My therapist says I have attachment issues. This is why I push people. I'm trying to get better. I sighed. Manipulation dressed as vulnerability, one of the most dangerous kinds. I refused to carry his healing, not when he'd tried to use my wallet as proof of love. By midnight, the text slowed. My body was exhausted, my thoughts frayed, but buried beneath the emotional mess was a steady, anchoring truth. Leaving had been the right choice, the only choice. Still, that didn't make it easy, because when you walk away, even for the right reasons, your mind replays every moment, every word, every gesture, trying to understand how something that felt warm turned into something sharp enough to cut you. I crawled into bed feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief for surviving that dinner. Dread for what might follow. Because the kind of man who delivers ultimatums so casually doesn't simply disappear when you refuse them. As I drifted towards sleep, one thought circled quietly at the edges of my mind. He won't let this go. This isn't over. I didn't know then how right I was. I didn't know his family would get involved. I didn't know the story he'd spin. I didn't know how far he'd go to rewrite the narrative with me as the villain. All I knew was that the fallout was coming, and I wasn't ready for any of it. By the next morning, I thought the emotional storm might have passed. His messages had stopped overnight, and the silence felt heavy but manageable. Like the eye of a hurricane hovering just long enough to make you hopeful before the next wall of wind tears through. I was barely sipping my coffee when the first wave hit. 11:17 a.m. Him. I didn't sleep. I can't believe you walked out on us. 11:23 a.m. You're overreacting. Everyone has expectations in relationships. 11:31 a.m. Just talk to me. You owe me that. Owe him? That word set something in me on fire. By noon, I blocked his number. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I thought that would end the barrage. It didn't. It simply rerouted it. Around 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. I checked the camera and froze. It wasn't him. It was his mother. Her posture was rigid, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin, angry line. She was dressed like she had marched straight from her house to mine with a mission. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity, and honestly a flicker of fear, pulled me toward the door. When I opened it, she didn't even wait for a greeting. "We need to talk about what you did to my son." Her tone wasn't accusatory, it was combative, sharp enough to slice through the air between us. I held the door halfway open. "Good evening. What exactly do you think I did?" "You humiliated him," she snapped. "You walked out on him. He's devastated. He hasn't eaten all day." If she expected guilt to bloom in me, she was going to be disappointed. "That's unfortunate," I said calmly, "but your son gave me an ultimatum, and I chose the option he offered." Her eyes widened in outrage, as if the idea of me choosing myself over him was unthinkable. "That ring was a test," she insisted. "A test of commitment. A woman who truly loves a man shows it." "By paying for her own engagement ring?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "He was ready to propose. That shows he's serious. You weren't willing to match his effort." A chill ran down my spine. The script was identical, word for word. Her beliefs were his beliefs, unquestioned, unchallenged, passed down like family heirlooms. "Your son and I dated for 1 month," I said. "Commitment isn't something you demand with a price tag." She scoffed. "That's because you're afraid of real love. Women these days, too selfish. A strong woman invests in her future." Strong woman? No. A manipulated woman invests blindly. A strong woman walks away. "Listen," I said, holding the door firmly. "I'm sorry he's upset, but I'm not responsible for your son's expectations." Her voice rose, sharp and echoing down the hall. "You're going to regret this. He deserves someone who values him, someone who knows his worth." "I hope he finds someone," I said honestly, "but it won't be me." The look she gave me could have cracked glass. She turned, muttering under her breath, and stormed out of the building. I closed the door and sank onto the couch, stunned. This wasn't normal, not even close. And yet, it escalated even further. The next afternoon, my phone lit up with an unknown number. When I answered, the voice on the other end was softer, tired, apologetic. "Hi, I'm his sister. Before you hang up, I just want to say I'm sorry." I blinked. "For what?" "For our mother, and for him, for all of it." I stayed quiet, letting her talk. "I told him the ring idea was insane. I told him he was going to lose you if he pushed it. But he listens to Mom more than anyone. She taught him that commitment is a transaction, that women should prove themselves. I swear it's the same tactic she used on our dad." I leaned back, absorbing her words. She continued, "I'm not calling to get you back with him. I just want you to know he's telling everyone you two are basically engaged. He's saying you got cold feet and ghosted him." My stomach sank, not from fear, but frustration. "We never even talked about marriage," I said. "Not once." "I know," she replied. "I saw your texts. You were normal. He created his own story." My pulse thudded. This wasn't just manipulation. He was rewriting reality, framing me as the villain before anyone could ask questions. "He told our mom you promised to move in with him soon," she added. "She believes him, of course. Mom always takes his side." I exhaled slowly. "Thank you for telling me." "I figured you deserved a warning," she said softly. "He's telling his version to mutual friends, too. I'm sorry." When she hung up, I stared at the wall, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief swirl through me. I called the friend who introduced us, hoping to clear things before rumors spread. His reaction was instant. "What the hell happened?" he asked. "He told me you two were practically engaged." I laid everything out. The ultimatum, the ring, the mother, the pressure. Silence, then. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. He seemed normal. He didn't used to be like this." People always say that about red flags before they unfurl. "I'll set the record straight," he said. "This isn't on you." For the first time that day, relief loosened something tight in my chest. That night, I received a message from a new number. "I know you blocked me. My sister lied to you. Don't trust her. She just wants to ruin what we had." Then, "You walking away proves you weren't ready for a real relationship. You'll regret this." And then, minutes later, "Please, I miss you. I'll do better. Just talk to me." I didn't respond. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because the next message, the one that nearly made my stomach drop, wasn't from him at all. It was from his LinkedIn account. The LinkedIn message arrived early the next morning while I was getting ready for work. I almost dropped my phone when I saw the notification. His name, his professional headshot, staring back at me from a place no sane person would ever use for personal drama. "I think we need to resolve this like adults," the message read. "You've damaged my reputation. I'm hearing people ask about the engagement ring incident. This is defamation. If you don't contact me to make this right, I may need to take legal action." For a moment, all I could do was stand there, toothbrush in hand, heart thudding painfully in my chest. Legal action. Against me. for consequences he caused himself. I reread the message, waiting for the words to rearrange into something coherent. They didn't. This wasn't desperation anymore. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even manipulation. It was a rewriting of reality so complete that I felt the floor beneath me shift. The light in the bathroom suddenly felt too bright, too sharp. My reflection in the mirror looked tight, strained, someone I barely recognized. My hands shook as I forwarded the message to a friend who worked in law. His reply came fast. He's bluffing. Truth is a defense. Also, who threatens defamation on LinkedIn? This is unhinged. I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. Something inside me had begun folding inward, like a protective instinct retreating deeper and deeper. By the time I got to my office, anxiety had woven itself into my breath. I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts spun in tight circles. The messages, his mother, his sister's warning, the spreading lies, the fact that a 1-month relationship had erupted into something so big, so chaotic, that I could no longer predict what home looked like at the end of the day. I felt eyes on me in the break room, normal glances, nothing unusual, but my mind turned them into suspicion. What if someone heard his version first? What if they believed him? What if his narrative spread faster than the truth? My stomach twisted. That night, I tried to distract myself with a show, but every few minutes I reached for my phone, checking for new numbers, new accounts, new angles he might try. Every vibration made my pulse spike. My shoulders ached from how tense they had become. I kept telling myself I shouldn't be this shaken, that I'd done the right thing, that walking away wasn't weakness. But the truth was messier. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a smear campaign, a psychological ambush I hadn't seen coming, a sense of being hunted, not physically, but socially, emotionally, digitally. And then, the worst of it, the loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being single, the kind that comes from not being believed, from knowing someone is out there rewriting the story of your life before you can even catch your breath. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the relationship, every smile, every conversation, every subtle manipulation I hadn't recognized when it was wrapped in charm. How did it escalate this fast? Why hadn't I trusted my instincts sooner? Had I missed something obvious? Was I overreacting now? Was I in danger? The questions never stopped. They gnawed at me from the inside, leaving me exhausted and raw. Around 2 a.m., another thought crept in, one darker than the rest. What if this doesn't end? What if he doesn't let me go? My breath hitched. I sat up, pressing my hands to my temples. The apartment felt too quiet, the shadows too long. Every creak in the walls made me flinch. I hated how much space he lived in inside my head now, how much nervous energy he'd left me with, how much of myself I felt slipping away under the weight of his behavior. This was my low point, not because I wanted him back, not even close, because I felt invaded, overrun, doubting who I was in the face of his narrative. I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of the chaos he manufactured so effortlessly, and how close it had come to swallowing me. I curled into bed again as the first hints of dawn touched the sky. The exhaustion finally took over, pulling me into a restless sleep. But even then, one truth pulsed through me. If this was how far he could go when we weren't together, what would he do next? The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening, just when I had convinced myself that things might finally be settling down. I was curled on my couch with a blanket and a mug of tea, trying to coax my body back into something like calm, when my phone buzzed with a notification from his sister. There was no text at first, just a screenshot. When I opened it, my pulse stuttered. It was a group chat. Him, his mother, several friends. Their words landed like blows. She's clearly unstable. His mother. No normal woman walks away from a man who's ready to commit. Maybe she's broke and embarrassed she couldn't afford a real future. Or she lied about being independent. Women do that all the time. She probably sabotaged things because she's terrified of commitment. You dodged a bullet, honestly. A real woman wouldn't have run off without even trying to talk. My name kept appearing, twisted, reshaped, turned into something unrecognizable. I wasn't me anymore. I was a convenient villain in their narrative, a cautionary tale, a scapegoat they built together brick by brick. A message from his sister appeared beneath the screenshot. I thought you should see this. For a moment, everything inside me went quiet, not numb, clear, the kind of clarity that is painful at first, like a wound being cleaned out so it can finally heal. I typed back slowly. Is this what they actually believe? Her reply came fast. They don't believe it. They need it. I sank deeper into the couch as she continued. My family has been doing this for years. Whenever something doesn't go their way, Mom rewrites the story so my brother is the victim. She did it to our dad, to his ex, to anyone who didn't bend the way she wanted. I closed my eyes. The pieces finally snapped into place. His entitlement, his rehearsed confidence, his belief that an ultimatum was normal, the pressure, the manipulation. It wasn't spontaneous, it wasn't random, it was learned. I'm sorry, she wrote. You didn't deserve any of this. He created a version of your relationship that never existed, and Mom is feeding into it because it lets her stay the hero. I exhaled slowly. What happened to his last girlfriend? There was a pause. She moved away after 6 months of dealing with them. Mom even showed up at her workplace crying once. HR had to intervene. My chest tightened at the thought. Relief and horror tangled together. Not because I pitied him, but because I finally saw the entire pattern for what it was. A cycle. A script. A trap I had almost slipped completely into. His sister sent one more message. You walking away so fast? That threw them off. Mom expected you to cave. She hates when women push back. A strange warmth spread through me. Not happiness, not triumph. Something quieter. Something steadier. Validation. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't the problem. For the first time since the night of the ultimatum, I felt the weight inside my lungs lighten. Later that week, a coworker pulled me aside in the break room. He looked uncomfortable, almost hesitant. Hey, I heard something weird, he said. It was at a friend's birthday party. Your ex was there. My stomach dipped, but I nodded for him to continue. He was telling everyone you two were basically engaged, that you backed out at the last second. I felt heat rise in my chest, not embarrassment, but frustration. Before I could reply, my coworker added, Someone called him out, in front of everyone. I blinked. Who? He shrugged. Some guy who knew you from work. Said he overheard you talking about what really happened weeks ago. Said you only dated 1 month. That he demanded you pay for a ring. He even mentioned the price. $18,000. And people believed him? I asked. Oh yeah, he said. Your ex tried to defend himself, but he didn't have anything. Someone laughed. Not at you, at him, at how ridiculous he sounded. A breath I didn't know I was holding slipped out slowly. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't karma. It was truth, finally catching up to the lies. Walking home that night, the world felt different. Not lighter exactly, but clearer. The fear had loosened its grip. The self-doubt had begun to fade. I could feel myself returning, inch by inch, breath by breath. That was my turning point. Not because someone defended me, not because his lies unraveled, not because his sister told me the truth, but because, for the first time, I understood completely. I was never the unstable one. I was never the coward. I was never the problem. I was simply the first woman in his life who refused to play a part in their script. And that realization changed everything. Fallout arrived quietly at first, the way cold air slips under a door, barely noticeable until suddenly it overwhelms the entire room. I thought cutting all contact, blocking every number he used, and telling mutual friends I didn't want updates would be the end of it. I thought silence would be my shield. But consequences don't need participation from the person who walked away. His life started collapsing entirely on its own, and I watched it happen from a distance I never intended to keep. The first hint came from the friend who introduced us. He texted me out of the blue one afternoon. Hey, I ran into him at a birthday party. You won't believe what happened. My stomach tightened. What did he say this time? He was telling everyone you two were basically engaged, that you backed out at the last second because you're afraid of commitment. Nothing new. It was the same story he'd been spinning since the night I walked away. The story where he was the wounded hero, and I was the unstable woman who reacted irrationally. But this time, something different happened. At the party, my friend continued, someone there actually knew the truth. I froze. Who? Your coworker. I didn't know you two knew each other. Small world, I guess. I pictured the break room weeks ago, when I'd vented quietly while stirring sugar into my coffee, never imagining the story would surface outside the fluorescent-lit walls of the office. He called him out, my friend said, right in front of everyone. I blinked. Called him out how? He said you only dated for a month. Said your ex demanded you pay for an $18,000 engagement ring. He even said he saw the screenshots. A long silence stretched between us, the weight of it settling into my chest. He showed everyone, my friend added quietly. The texts, the ring, all of it. My heartbeat shifted, not fast, steady, anchored, certain. What happened after that? My friend let out a small, disbelieving laugh. Everyone just stopped. The whole room went quiet. People looked at your ex like he'd grown another head. I imagined it. His certainty cracking. His performance unraveling under the simplest, most powerful force there is. The truth. And then, my friend continued, someone actually laughed. Not at you, at the ridiculousness of his story. My breath released slowly, like a knot untying. That laugh wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. It meant his illusion had finally broken. He didn't recover from it gracefully. My friend said his face went red, his sentences fell apart, and he stormed out of the party before anyone could ask more questions. But the unraveling didn't stop there. Days later, his sister reached out one last time before moving away. He's still talking about you, she said. He's convinced you'll come back eventually. Mom tells him you'll realize what you lost and crawl back to him. I closed my eyes. Why would she say that? She needs him to stay the victim, his sister replied. If he ever admits he messed up, she'd have to admit she taught him wrong. She'd rather rewrite the world than do that. Her next words stuck with me long after the conversation ended. This is who they are. You just happened to get out before the fallout hit you. And she was right, because the fallout didn't hit me. It hit him. Not because I wished it, not because I pushed for it, not because I sought revenge, but because the truth, once revealed, reshaped everything around it. People stopped believing him. Mutual friends quietly backed away. The narrative he built for himself collapsed in places he never expected, and I didn't have to lift a single finger. Then came the strangest moment of all, the final, almost surreal sign that the whole thing had come full circle. A notification appeared on my phone. Friend request from his mother. Not an apology, not accountability, just an attempt to re-enter my life, as if everything she'd said, implied, or encouraged hadn't existed. I didn't accept. I didn't respond. I simply blocked her. Not out of anger, out of understanding. Some people don't seek resolution. They seek access. And the healthiest thing I could do was close the door completely. By the time the dust settled, I realized I hadn't lost anything. Not pride, not peace, not dignity, not even time, because every moment afterward felt lighter than anything I'd carried while I was with him. He was left with his own story collapsing around him. I walked away with my truth intact. And that was the difference. That was the fallout. Life slowly found its rhythm again, not in one sweeping moment, but in small, steady shifts. Mornings felt quieter. Evenings didn't carry the same tension. My phone stopped being a source of dread. I went back to the things I loved without having to justify them to anyone. Somewhere along the way, the tightness in my chest finally loosened, and I realized I wasn't carrying his shadow anymore. I stayed single for a while, not because of fear, but because peace felt unfamiliar in a good way. I wanted to enjoy it. I wanted to remember who I was without someone demanding proof of my devotion or twisting my boundaries into flaws. Meeting someone new happened naturally, gently. No pressure, no rush, no strange expectations disguised as romantic urgency. After 4 dates, we sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, one intentionally far from the spot where everything with my ex had spiraled apart. And he asked, with a calm sincerity, "So, why hadn't you been dating for a while before we met?" I took a breath, then offered the short version. The ring, the demand, the ultimatum, the mother at my doorstep, the LinkedIn threat. Each detail made his eyebrows rise a little more. "He asked you to pay for the engagement ring?" "Yes." $18,000? "Yes." "And he brought his mother into it?" "Yes." "And then tried to blame everything on you?" "Exactly." He leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Well, I'm glad you walked away. Most people would have tried to fix someone like that. You protected yourself." Not judgment, not pity, not the slightest hint that he doubted my version of events. Just clarity, a grounded response from someone who understood that healthy relationships don't rely on manipulation or price tags. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't looking for grand gestures. I wasn't looking for someone to choose me loudly. I was looking for something quiet, steady, respectful. Someone who didn't view love as a series of tests or negotiations. Someone who didn't need me to bleed to prove my worth. The farther I stepped away from the chaos of my past, the clearer everything became. Love is not a transaction. Love is not an ultimatum. Love is not a performance. Love does not demand financial proof of loyalty. Love does not require suffering to be considered real. I kept my dignity. I kept my peace. I kept my $18,000. I didn't lose anything, not one thing. If anything, I gained the most important lesson of all. When someone forces you to choose between their approval and your self-respect, choose yourself. Every time. Walking away wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of a life where love isn't a test to survive, but a connection you build freely.